Happy December, everyone. And with today being December 1st, I want to take a minute to acknowledge today as World AIDS Day. This is a day that has been recognized on December 1st since 1988 and is meant to be a day to continue to raise awareness regarding the HIV and AIDS epidemic, as well as to mourn the loss of the tens of millions of lives that have been lost due to this deadly disease. So in honor of World AIDS Day, I figured let's take a minute to talk about what is HIV and how does it differ from AIDS. And in order to do that, we'll take a step back in time to the start of this deadly pandemic. In 1981, the Centers for Disease Control, or CDC, released an edition of its Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. This is something you can think of as a weekly newsletter in the infectious disease community that's distributed across the country to talk about critical and emerging issues. In this 1981 edition of its Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report, the CDC documented the case of 5 gay men in California who had died related to a rare form of pneumonia. This is commonly recognized as the first documented cases of what would go on to be known as AIDS here in the United States, and really was the tip of the iceberg of what was to come. Following the release of that report by the CDC, much of the subsequent coverage regarding this emerging illness became known as the gay cancer. And this really culminated in May of 1982 when the New York Times released an article officially titling this new disease as gay-related immunodeficiency, or GRID. And this is something that really would go on to have a lasting impact of labeling this new disease as a gay illness. It wasn't until September of 1982 that this emerging disease would officially become known as syndrome, or AIDS, after it was recognized outside of the gay community in other populations such as hemophiliacs and IV drug users. One of the major hurdles for the AIDS epidemic was, for the longest time, we didn't know what was causing this deadly illness, and it wasn't until 1985 that it was recognized that AIDS was being caused by a virus. And you have to recognize at this time, virology, or the study of viruses, was very much in its early stages. In 1986, it was officially recognized that AIDS was being caused by a retrovirus that would go on to be known as human immunodeficiency virus, or HIV. One of the things that at the time was very unique to HIV and continues to make it very hard to treat is HIV is what's known as a retrovirus. This means that it has a certain building block to it known as RNA. As most of you know, in our bodies, our molecular genome is composed of what's known as DNA. You can think of RNA as an in-between messenger in our bodies when we're transcribing DNA from one area to another. This is what makes HIV unique, in that HIV will bind to one of our cells, specifically what we call CD4 cells. These are, important cells of our immune system, and it actually inserts itself into the cell and then uses our cell's own machinery to transcribe it from that RNA block to DNA, which is the building blocks of our cells. It then actually inserts itself in that DNA form into our genetic code, into our own DNA. It's from that point on that that virus is forever a part of that cell, and then it uses that cellular machinery to continue replicating itself and basically pumping out new forms of the HIV virus. And this is a process that not only exponentially increases the viral load of the individual, but also goes on to kill that CD4 cell. This is what makes HIV so dangerous, in that it really impairs the cells of our immune system and makes it to where our bodies can no longer fight off immune infections. So many of you might be asking, if HIV is a virus, why have we not created a vaccine for it, similar to, the seasonal flu or COVID? And really that comes to the fact that HIV is unique in that it is a retrovirus that actually integrates itself into our genome. And that really is what has made it very difficult to be able to cure HIV, but does become a part of how we have gone on to treat HIV. I also want to take a minute to talk about how HIV is transmitted and how it's not transmitted. Ways people can transmit HIV include use of non-sterile surgical instruments, pregnancy and breastfeeding, organ transplant, blood transfusions, and unprotected sex. And ways HIV cannot be transmitted include in sharing food, utensils, drinks, insect bites, kissing, touching, sharing clothes, towels, or using similar toilets or showers. So why is this all important? And it's important to know that the vast majority of people globally, estimated to be about 37.7 million people, are currently living with HIV. And because of the advances we have made in this field, most of those individuals live completely normal, completely long lives through the use of what's known as HAART, or highly active antiretroviral therapy, which we'll talk about in a future video. We've also made great advances in terms of pre-exposure prophylaxis for preventing people from getting HIV, and all of this is very important because it also leads to what we call U equals U, which we'll also talk about in some future videos. But this is important because most of those people that live with HIV don't actually go on to develop AIDS. What we define AIDS as currently is basically an individual being diagnosed with an AIDS-related illness, and you can see some of those here. And these are basically rare illnesses that are only seen in people with severely damaged immune systems. Most people like you and I would not have these illnesses because we have a functional immune system. So either diagnosis of an AIDS-related illness or their CD4 count, that marker of their immune system, drops below the level of 200. Both of these are official diagnostic criteria to say somebody has AIDS. Well, I hope you all learned some important information about what is HIV and how it differs from AIDS, and really that our work continues to be able to end this epidemic. Again, 37.7 million people are still living with HIV today. So look forward to some future videos. I talked about some of the things we'll talk about, such as treatment, and I'm also excited to talk about really some history of the AIDS epidemic here in the United States. In the meantime, please take a minute to consider making a donation to my campaign in honor of World AIDS Day today. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.